Welcome to Managing Membership and Partnership E-MDT webinar today. I can take this one. Handed it over to you a little too early, but this is our disclaimer. You all know this very well, that this project is supported by the Office of Victims of Crime, DOJ, and the opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in the materials and webinar are that of the contributors and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the DOJ. Next slide. And a couple items before we get started. You all know this very well, but make sure you're muted if you're not speaking. There'll be more than enough time to kind of take questions. Feel free to use the chat function during your time here to engage with the content, ask questions for later, participate in general. Sorry, you might hear my dog. She wants to be involved today. If you would like, rename your Zoom to include your name and your pronouns or where you're coming from. It's always helpful. Raise your hand if you have a question or a comment that you want to speak out loud if you're more comfortable doing it that way. And of course, if you have any tech issues, the best way to reach me is actually messaging me directly in the chat. Because I'll be on this webinar today throughout this time with you all. So I'm happy to help you if you have any tech concerns, can't hear, can't see, have questions in general. We'll be sending out a follow-up email too in case you miss anything. And we won't be using breakout rooms today, so no worries about that. So that is all from me, and I'm going to hand it back over to our presenters.
Great, thank you so much, Anna. So I'm going to do my best. I'm told that when I move too much, my sound goes out. So hopefully I will behave and not be moving around, but feel free to yell at me if I am. So I am Allison Granata. I am the Assistant Director for E-MDT Initiatives at the Upstate Elder Abuse Center at Lifespan. I still currently coordinate 3 teams in the Finger Lakes region of New York State. And I am also overseeing the implementation of the statewide E-MDT project. And I originally started by coordinating 7 teams in the Finger Lakes region back in 2013. So that's a little bit about me. So I'll turn it over to Becky.
Hi, and I'm, I know it says Rebecca, but that's only for business cards and if my mom was mad at me. So I'm Becky Bradley, and I'm E-MDT coordinator, and I am in the Broome hub. So that's, I oversee about 5 counties. I run teams in 5 counties. And I work out of Action for Older Persons, which is a non-for-profit. I have been doing this since they went statewide, because I don't remember the year exactly. And prior to that, I ran the long-term care ombudsman program for Region 11 for New York State. So that's just a snippet of me as well.
Thank you, Becky. So this is our funding acknowledgement for reference. Our shout out to our funders, the New York State Office of Victim Services, and the New York State Office for the Aging. You all can read, and I believe that the learning objectives were included, but we're going to be talking a bit about managing membership and partnerships with your E-MDTs based off of the experiences that Becky and I have had through our years of coordinating teams. And so we're just going to start off with a couple of just very basic, quick overview so that you know what we're talking about. Sorry. So you know what we're talking about when we're talking about E-MDT membership, since I know that that can look different depending on the agency, organization, or for the national teams, the state that you're in. So when we are talking about E-MDT membership, our member agency is the actual agency that we're talking about. And then we have representatives from those various agencies. Participation on the E-MDT is voluntary from almost all of the member agencies that sit on the team. We do have some funding through our grant that we are able to fund our specialty services, which is forensic accounting, civil legal attorneys, and then geriatric psychiatrists. And so we kind of break it out into, we have core members and then we have liaison members. The core members are those groups of people that you are talking about, and I'll go to the next slide, that you're really starting your team with and then enhancing and adding on to from there. So when we're talking about core members, we're talking about the coordinator. So in my situation, me or Becky, we usually start by looking at adult protective services, Office for the Aging, local law enforcement, and the district attorney's office. And then from there, we're building. And when we're building, it really depends on the needs of the community that we're walking into. So for both Becky and I, we coordinate teams in multiple counties. Our job isn't to act as the expert in that county. Our job is to be the expert in pulling people together. And so doing some of that reach out. So we'll be talking a little bit about that today. But one of our little tips is that you really don't need to have everyone at the table to get started. Even if one of these core members, you're not able to get started from the beginning, don't be afraid to use those people who are willing to come to the table to build off of the member agencies that you already have identified. My understanding is that this is kind of a mixed group of some people who have established teams, some who are newer teams, some who are just starting off. So some of this may be review for you or basic. And then also when we're thinking about, expectations of what we're asking of our core members, I included an example that comes from our policies and procedures document that we use here in New York State, that of what we're asking, kind of the basics of somebody who is coming to sit at the table and be part of our E-MDT. And so we're really looking at somebody who can assign someone to come regularly to the team. In some situations, that looks different county by county. So in some counties, we have one representative who comes every meeting. We have a couple of counties who they have 2 people assigned and they alternate every other month. So it really is kind of depending on what that member agency can offer you. And what we're willing to do as coordinators is to get creative and be flexible with them to ensure that we do have representation from that discipline. I personally love it when I can have that same person every month to month, because I think it makes it a little bit easier to build the rapport and both with me as a coordinator and for the team. But it is certainly something that we've had to get creative with people in the past. Becky, did you want to add anything else to that piece?
I mean, basically, when you've got these teams and you're looking at who's going to come and we ask them, please have an alternate. The odds of them having an alternate in some situations, especially if it's a district attorney's office, it's extremely hard for us to get that alternate to arrive and show up, particularly in a situation where they're if it's the district attorney or say an ADA, they're the ones that are looking at everything and actively working on the case. So they're the ones that are going to have the specifics. And in the past, anytime I've had an alternate step in, they have limited understanding and they have limited answers during that meeting. And the usual response is, I'll have to check on that and have so-and-so get back to you. So basically they're kind of like dressed up note takers. So that can be kind of the difficult piece, especially when you have someone in that position, like where you're always looking to them and you're like, all right, so what do we need to do to get this to happen? And so sometimes, that can be a little bit of an issue, which is why, when you're looking at your membership, you want to make sure that whoever is assigned is someone who's actually going to see the value of attending the meetings on a regular basis versus like, this is something that the DA told me I had to go to.
Yeah, and to add on to that, especially the DA, I whether it's a DA or not, or another representative, is that people come to the E-MDTs with varying willingness to participate. I think that's the nicest way that I can probably say that. But we have had some, I can speak from personal experience that I've had some people who are very excited and eager and willing to join. They kind of get the concept from the beginning. They want to be able to be a part of the discussion and move it forward. And then I have the people who are on their phones, pushed back from the table. All of a sudden I realized my mic would cut out, doing, I don't know what, playing games, maybe paying attention. I'm not really sure. And so it can be difficult when you're trying to engage. But one of the things that I found very helpful, especially when I was first starting out my teams back in 2013, was if that person kept coming meeting to meeting. I was flustered and discouraged that they were pushed back and they were on their phone. But the fact that they kept showing up, even if it was begrudgingly, I still had them there and I still had a chance to get their buy-in and to work on that buy-in. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that later.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Becky. Sorry.
Nope, I was just agreeing.
Gotcha. So some of the other, expectations is we're hoping that they'll talk with others in their agency about the E-MDT. One of the things that I found is that some people assume that because they're the designated representative for that member agency, they feel like they have to be the ones to bring the cases if there's a case that's being referred, or that's not, for me personally, that's not necessarily what I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody who can kind of be our voice as the team and reminding other people within their office that this is a resource that's available to them. But if we have, whether it's an adult protective service worker, a district attorney's office, law enforcement, it's not necessarily falling on that individual to actually do all of the work of the team. And they're not required to be the ones that are the only ones to present cases if they come up. And then really, I think the biggest thing that we really look for when we're asking people to participate is that we want them to speak from the experience and the expertise of the member organization that they are representing. And so that may mean that we are looking to have them be able to speak to the law enforcement angle or the adult protective services angle. One of the other things that we try when we're attempting to obtain or when we're trying to engage for team members is we're looking for somebody who has a decision-making role in the agency, because we want somebody who, how do I say this? I'm not really asking people to bend the rules, but if somebody can say, this is slightly outside of how we would normally do this, but I know that this is still within the confines, they can make that decision right then and there in the meeting, and they're not necessarily bringing it back. Certainly there will be times when that happens, but for what we're looking for, we're usually looking for somebody, we're hoping that it can be somebody who's at like a supervisor level or higher, that they can make decisions if the case is appropriate for their agency to take, may be able to clarify some like eligibility things, or if it is something that they may be able to stretch their guidelines to be able to make to assist with a certain case. And then when we are thinking about liaison members, these are represented or agencies that don't necessarily send a person to every single meeting. And so they may be a special, unique resource that you call upon when you know that there's a certain aspect of a case. One of the things that I find difficult with liaison membership, and I hope you all don't mind that I'm just going to be very honest with where some of my struggles have been, is that for me, I find that a lot of my cases get referred very close to the meeting date. And so with my core members, they know when the meeting's being held, they know what day and time, they know where, they have it on their calendar. But sometimes I don't get a referral until a day or two before. And then I'm scrambling, trying to make sure I have an understanding of the case and then reaching out to that liaison member. And sometimes I feel a little bit guilty because I'm not giving them a ton of notice. But there have been times where either they're, of course, sometimes they're able to come, or other times they're able to discuss the case with me. And so as the coordinator, I'm able to say, unfortunately, this person wasn't able to attend, but they were able to provide some feedback that can contribute towards the case discussion. So I love having the liaison membership, but that's just one of the difficulties that I've personally run into when I'm trying to engage with liaison members. And I'm seeing a couple of head nods, so I feel like I may not be alone in that. So. Again, who is added to your team from there, as I mentioned before, it's really going to depend on the community and the county that you're in. And we just, in that one, the final bullet, there are various factors that play into it. Sometimes there are things like, if there's a specific jurisdiction for law enforcement, for instance, or is there a specific financial institution? When I'm reaching out to financial institutions, I typically wait until I've had my first meeting or more than one meeting to be able to ask those people that are sitting around that table, because again, they're the experts in the community, and I'm just there to pull everyone together. And so I'm saying, who's somebody that's a standout for you when you think about, okay, APS, I need to reach out to somebody from the financial world. Who is it that you think of? Because that's the person that I want on the team. And so we're using those connections and the resources that the member organizations have identified already to try to build upon who our core members may be.
Yeah, and if when it says on there the county size and access to services, when I was starting my counties out, I have one county that is, I guess you could call it urban, but in comparison to, other places in New York State, I wouldn't exactly say it's like a bustling metropolis, but, we have a bus system. And then the other ones, are extremely rural, like you have to take a right at the pig farm, that kind of thing. So when we're, looking at those teams, and I went out to meet with the director of the Office for Aging out there, or with the head of their adult protective services, and I had these ideas, I was met with some smirks and some basically that's cute, you're cute, yeah. You think that this is going to happen, that's fun. And so as it's been said by my executive director before, my job at times with these situations feels like herding cats. You're just trying to get them all wrangled together at the same time so that, we can have a moment and keeping their attention. So, it can be difficult depending on what you're looking at. So that would be my piece on that. So the gaps in membership, teams are fluid, and that makes a lot of sense because as we've seen with COVID and the great resignation that has occurred throughout the country, people are coming, people are going, right? So trying to keep up with who's staying in what position and where they are and where they're going, it's kind of hard to always know if that person still exists within your team, or if that agency is going to continue to want to participate, which will bring you the gaps. And when that happens, sometimes, I look at things and I say, okay, so if this particular agency doesn't have anybody to fill that role right now, the person that was in that role, do they actually participate in a way that we found it to be beneficial on a regular basis? Was it something where I need to really press this agency for a constant person? Or would it be someone that could move more into a liaison role? Where when they're available, then we'll ask them, or when the case presents itself and there's some meat for them, then that's usually what piques their interest. So that's kind of, there'll be an ebb and flow as far as who's in the team and who's not in the team. And it will become the coordinator's duty at all times to maintain who is that team. We Allison said, we're not the experts. We're just the ones that make sure that the experts are having a positive and fruitful conversation in regards to what we can do to help these victims, and we just kind of guide it. So having those individuals at the table, while yes, it is important, maybe not necessarily all of them need to be there every single meeting. And you understand that as a coordinator, because you're learning your team, you're learning your county. And so the needs will you'll start to recognize the needs. You'll start to see where the issues are. The gaps could be though, you cannot get someone from a financial institution to kind of just come on board, even if it's not their bank, because some of the banks will say well, it's not my bank, so why am I coming? No, but you have insight into financial institutions and how they operate and you generally all talk to each other in some fashion because they have their little secret groups that meet, you know, and they pass information to each other about like, look out for this guy. And you know, if we can kind of get our way into that little group, and just slap a Post-it note on it, don't forget, that's, you know, kind of what we want to do. So it's definitely, it's never going to be a problem that doesn't exist for a coordinator. Just like anything, you're always going to wonder, like, do I need to ask if there's a more appropriate replacement, or do I need to have some one-on-one time with this individual and try to sort out exactly what the issue might be. And there will be people that will recommend other people that come on, which is totally fine, but it has to go through the coordinator, because we're the ones that are saying it's okay for this individual to fully understand and have access to this information, because there is a lot of really important and confidential information that gets discussed at these meetings. So we can't just have anybody in there. They have to go through the same process as everyone else. We have to make sure they sign the agreements. If there's a memorandum of understanding in that county, that has to be addressed as well. And usually what I end up doing is I address the group as a whole first and say, listen, this is the thought, having someone come in and, you know, and even if it's watching an active team because they're from another county and that county's trying to launch, you know, I ask ahead of time. So, you know, when Allison comes for the monitoring visit, I give them like 3 months of notice that it's coming, because I'm like, get it together, guys. All right. I got a house to pay for. So it's important to do that.
I want to highlight, especially, you know, the recommendations flowing through the coordinator. You know, that's always been important, so that, to Becky's point, we can kind of keep track, because our role is to keep track of who is our team. But I also want to point out that in this virtual and remote world, the ability to obtain confidentiality, I don't know if other people have found this, but it's a little bit more difficult than when, and I'm not sure how many of you may have been having in-person meetings before COVID hit, but I used to be able to see somebody walk in, know who they were, and slip them a confidentiality agreement. And so now if they're coming to the meeting late and I may not anticipate it, there's just a whole new kind of process and things that you need to keep in mind. So I just wanted to highlight that as well, to really encourage your team, your member agencies to, if they have recommendations, please, you know, I certainly don't want to discourage the recommendations, but to just, you know, kind of be respectful of the process and the fact that it is really helpful, so that it's not disruptive to the meeting, the case discussion, the presentation, whatever's happening, to keep that flow going. And again, when we're thinking about kind of gaps in membership, some of those are very obvious gaps, like Becky said, that you can't get the financial institution to the table. But some of them are very case specific. So there may be a very specific need within this certain case that you're discussing. I had an issue with, not an issue, but I had something come up with one of my teams recently where I was really struggling with somebody who was well known in a certain population, and I was struggling with figuring out how do I would have loved to have somebody from that community come and participate in the meeting, but I knew I couldn't protect the confidentiality of the suspected perpetrator that we were discussing, because of how well known they were in this community and how all this community was in my area. And so I really struggled with trying to figure out how exactly do I need this. I had a case specific need. It wasn't going to be somebody who would be a regular team member. And so actually, Lisa, you helped me with this case and talked me through some ideas and did some brainstorming and things like that, that really changed the way that we approached this case. But it was just a different way than I have had to consider in the past. And so there are some unique things that you're going to come across as well.
So as far as recruitment strategies, there's the way that you can formally do it, and you should, but then there's also, you know, the other way, which I'm more one of those people, you know, I'm more one of those like, hey, how are you? Remember me that you didn't answer my email? I'm in person now. without being too pushy, because then they don't want to talk to you. But, you know, we do the recruitment letters. So there's the formal letter and invitation, which I send out, and I have no idea if they ever get read. And then I kind of figure out who are my main points, like who would be the people that are the leaders as far as within those agencies, or even sometimes it's people that I don't want on my team, but it's someone that can have influence over who would be placed on my team. And it's important to get them to understand that. And I'll ask for, you know, in-person time with them if possible, whether it be over the phone. Is that in person? I don't know. Zoom, or, you know, the traditional old school, like, here we are. You know, I'll do that. I make sure that they get all of the information as far as what the team means. And then something that I've done in the past when I felt like people weren't as interested is I know who my champions are on my team. I know who are the ones that truly have full faith in the program, which, you know, are all of them. But the ones that are really loud about it, those are the ones that I ask to write letters. And they will for me. Like it's kind of like a reference letter, you know, but I ask them to give me a little jotting of their experience on the team and why they think it's been beneficial to their career, as well as what it can do for the people that they're servicing and how they feel it ties in with the other agencies. And I found that has been extremely helpful. So that's something that I like to do when I can feel the hesitation wall go up. And people are, you know, they're just kind of like, you know, smiling, and they're like, yep, sounds good. And then I don't hear from them for like 3 weeks. So that's one of the ways that I've always found that it's worked. But I also try to find out what their struggles are. And one of the struggles, obviously, that we always run into is adult protective services. They don't have enough staff, obviously. And they're overworked. They're probably they're being forced to do some hours for child protective services, you know, and things, if it doesn't meet those parameters by just enough, or it's trimming the line and they've got like 7 other cases they got to go out on, that one's not going to make the cut. So I want to make sure that they understand that my role as a coordinator is just as important as their role as a coordinator, where I'm working with them, for them, to help them. So if they get a bunch of receipts from, you know, power of attorney that they've asked for, I would be more than willing. It's actually one of my favorite things, to go through those receipts and line them up, and then sit there and go, you stole here and you stole there, and this is the issue and this is the issue. I'm not a forensic accountant. I have a calculator. And that's kind of what I like, you know, and that way they don't have to do it. You know, I'm like, I've already done this. I've already done this breakdown. But sometimes I try to do it in a more collaborative way, you know? So I'm like, listen, let's all meet at this place and we'll go over this and we'll just kind of see what we can come up with. And so, I mean, one time it was myself and the district attorney and a chief investigator for the sheriff's department. And I don't remember who the other person was. And we're sitting in there, and I'm telling you what, it felt like Law and Order. It was great. We were putting stickies on stuff, and I was highlighting, and I was like, look at this. So, you know, it was a good team building event, and I enjoyed it. And we got a lot of information figured out. And those were the people that were going to be able to make the next set of moves. So we already had our next action plan, you know, like what our recommendations were going to be before the next meeting, you know, so that I could go to the team and say, in the interim of our last meeting, this is what was supposed to be done. It was done. And then we did this. And that kind of, you know, is exciting for people to hear. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but I actually like really, not because Allison's in the room, really like this job. And I have a genuine enthusiasm for the work that I do. So when I start talking about all of the things that we can do as coordinators and what these teams are like capable of doing, I get really excited. And then I hope that kind of stokes excitement in other people. Even if after the fact, you know, they go back and they're like, she is exhausting. Because yes. So, you know, there's different ways. You kind of find your own way. You kind of find what works, what people kind of are drawn in by, and honestly, and then there's just some people where you're like, that person is stone. I don't want them on the team anyways, because I don't feel they have a soul. So those are the ones that we, we're like, okay, well, that was fun. So that's a couple different ideas and ways to do your member recruitment strategies. But works with, go with what works for you, to be honest. You take a while, figure out your county, figure out your people, figure out who the champions are for your goal, and then kind of take it from there.
Also figuring out kind of how you are as a coordinator as well. And so I think, as Becky said that she's not really super formal when it comes to, despite the bow tie today, I just want to point out that she's not super formal when she comes to the various processes. I'm not either, but when I started, however many years ago now, I was much more formal. But as I've grown or aged in my coordinator life, I've kind of changed the way that I interact with my teams. I've changed the way that I interact with the various members that I'm trying to bring on board. And so it's kind of figuring out and being able to feed off of the other person that you're working with as well. I think a big piece of what we do as coordinators is trying to be adaptable and adapt to the situation and the people that we're with. And so being able to see that, okay, this type of recruitment strategy isn't going to work, and being able to kind of change that, making things more personable, making those various connections in a different way. So, I think it certainly changes as you grow in your role as a coordinator.
Yeah. So when you're showcasing the benefits, basically this is something like you want people to understand why, like, what's the point, right? Like, yeah, I know we're helping the victims, but what exactly is it that we're doing? So letting everybody understand that because of what they did, this happened, right? Had they have not participated, had they have not given that little idea or thought, we might not have looked in this area and this might not have happened. So I'm short of pom-poms, everyone's cheerleader. I'm always telling everybody like how proud I am of the work that they're doing, because I truly am, and letting them know that none of this would be possible if they weren't willing to come to the table and have these discussions, and letting them know positive outcomes when they happen. I mean, when we had, a couple million in saved assets and just money happen in this last year, I sat there and I was like, guys, do you know how much money was saved for these victims by this team in the course of this many months? And that's just one person or two people or whatever. Imagine when we're looking at even more cases, or when this is happening, or if we're able to come up with different ideas and ways to work around apprehension by whoever might have brought the case to us, and whatever the issue might be. So it really does kind of reinvigorate the people, because sometimes, burnout is everywhere, and they could be like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to, what's the point? I give you this piece of information, then you don't need me again. I always need you. And that's what I tell them. It's not up to just one person to do everything. Everybody, has an active reason for being there. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like you helped during that meeting. It could be you heard something, and then 3 weeks from now, you're attending some other meeting, because aren't we all? And you're sitting there, and that piece of information completely helps an individual unrelated to what our team was talking about. And you can use that to help someone. And not only did that help you grow as an individual, but it helped you grow in your professional career, because now you're able to pass that information on to another person. So it's a fun game of telephone where the words are all correct, and it's very helpful. Or at least saying, hey, you should call so-and-so. I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, something similar came up. They had a really great idea. Touch base with them. They're they might be able to help you through this. And you've just eliminated an area that might have just been a situation where the hands went up and nobody knew what to do, and it stalled out for someone else. So having those relationships and watching them kind of foster into these really positive encounters on a regular basis is great. But the other thing I will always tell people is, it's okay to tell me you can't do something. Like you can tell me there's no way we can go beyond that point, which is fine. Walk me through every step until that point happens. And when we get to that point, everybody else in the room, there has to be someone in that room that is going to be able to say, you know what, I can do there. That's where my piece fits in, and then we keep going. So, it's having those conversations and not being afraid to kind of encourage them to happen, because some people will just sit there quiet because they're afraid to say anything. And I don't like to call people out, but at the end of the day, when I want the victims to get what they, deserve, I'll be like, hey, like, Allison, tell me what you can do, because I know you can, because I paid attention and I studied what you do for a living. So that's something that is very important. So always let the team know that this is a positive thing, even though sometimes, negative outcomes do occur. Unfortunately, in this line of work, we do have victims that fail. We have victims that don't make it through the entire course of a case. We can only move as fast as the legal system, and the legal system can only move as fast as the laws allow. So we, do the best we can with what we've got. And that's the point of us as coordinators, because we're like, hey, I know you're really busy, but don't forget, we're still doing this case. So, and just keeping it to the forefront of their minds.
Yeah, and I when we're talking about showcasing the benefits, I want to acknowledge the fact that, as I mentioned before, I know that some, and I don't know who, so I apologize that I just keep saying some, but I know that some people are newer in their development or are in the process of developing. And so this is really easy for us to say, right? As coordinators who have been doing this for X number of years, who have lived and are as excited as Becky is about the benefits that an E-MDT provides. And so I just want to recognize the fact that this is easy for us to say, like, this is why this is great. But it can be really hard when you're first starting off to be able to get that engagement and to kind of communicate that. But I would also encourage you to feed off of each other. And also, you have your TA providers through Lisa and Betsy, and then also, there's an entire, in New York State, we're a statewide initiative. And so we can always feed off of each other as well and collaborate and brainstorm and things like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that it feels, for if anyone's sitting there like, yeah, okay, easier said than done. I was there, and I definitely get it. Like, I definitely understand that it can be easy to be like, okay, listen, this, adult protective commissioner of Department of Social Services, like, it's holistic. It saves you time and money. Well, how? So we haven't actually done it yet, but I know it does. And so but that's something that we can, your TA providers, and then also, if you need to feed off of us as well, I'm kind of offering myself up, but I'd be more than happy to discuss challenges, because we run into issues. We all do, no matter what stage of development you're in. And sometimes you feel like you're starting a team brand new over again. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
So as far as tips, be clear about your expectations for members and for yourself. I know that when I started out, I had just champagne dreams, and I ended up on a beer budget, right? Like, I had this pie in the sky idea that all of these teams, everyone's going to come running to the table, and they're like, where have you been my whole life? This is the best. I'm so excited. Let's do this. And it turned into, a smattering of enthusiasm, and then people who were like, yeah, I'll send someone. So be clear about that, but also, that we're not going to be able to solve every problem. Victims are going to have the right to say no. Victims are going to have the right to turn down any of these recommendations that we come back with, or family, or whoever it is that we are working with. There's going to be gaps, unfortunately, within the law that are going to allow for certain things to occur, because those power of attorneys or whoever they were just a little bit smarter and knew how to do certain things that would get by and kind of take away our ability to move forward. Or, it might be I hate to say it, but just not attractive enough for some of the DAs to want to prosecute, because elder abuse is not sexy. And when it's not sexy and it doesn't look like it's going to grab a headline, nobody wants it. And, you know, I can try to dress it up all I want, but that's lipstick on a pig sometimes, and it's not going to work. So, you know, we can only do as much as we can do with what we've got. And hopefully that will be enough to get them what they need. Like restitution is the dream, right? But how often is restitution a reality? It's not a high percentage of what we're able to do, especially when you're dealing with someone who's been scammed. So we want to make sure that they understand that, because when the money leaves the country, the money's left the country, and it's really hard for us to get anything back. So, you know, at least stopping the bleed, that's a success, because it's not continuing to occur. Putting in protective factors to alleviate those people getting access to them, that's a positive, that's a success. So it's getting them to kind of reframe what they see as what the success is, you know, from the reality of what the success is to what they think the success should be, because it's not always possible to have that 100% amazing high five outcome. So that's something to keep in mind. Utilize your professional connections for introductions. I mean, I've done that. I've gone places. I intentionally join committees and things like that just to kind of get an idea of who's in the room. But I've also worked in this field for 22 years. So I kind of know a lot of people here locally. But if there's someone new that I don't know, like I'll totally go somewhere with someone and go, introduce me, you know, and just like at a bar. I'm not at a bar, but like as if I was at a bar. I'm sorry. That is no. Like at a library, I'll be like, introduce me. So, you know, that's something that you can utilize. You know, there are people that are willing to kind of help out in that area. So you want to make sure that, you know, you're taking advantage of that without looking like you're taking advantage. We're not manipulating our friends.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that, Becky, real quick, and just say, don't be afraid to name drop, because I was extremely grateful with one county that I was really, really struggling with. That was a rural community, and I was just having a hard time to getting in the door there. And I spoke with the chief of police from one of the small towns there, very well respected man, and I had consulted on a case with him. He was extremely grateful for the information that we were able to provide just without having a team together yet. And he said, when I want you to call this person and this person and tell them that I told you to call them. And the fact that I could say, leave on a message, so-and-so and chief so-and-so, you know, encouraged me to give you a call, and he wanted me to follow up with him and let him know if I was able to connect with you. That got me a call back. And so don't be afraid to ask for that either. So if you've gotten a connection from somebody, that was something that I was hesitant to directly ask for until somebody had offered it to me. And then I was like, you know what, I can ask this question. They're allowed to say no. And so that's just a little addition onto that.
Yeah. As far as like requesting the meeting to be hosted at the location, that was one of the ways that I was able to get in on my last county, because I had one specific agency where that county felt if that agency wasn't participating or wasn't like enthused about it, then what was the point? And we weren't going to show up. So I worked on them for a very long time. And finally, I kind of waited out a retirement. And then when the new person came in, I was like, hey, I'm your best friend. You don't know how to do this job? Sounds good. Let me teach you a couple things about E-MDT, which are going to help you. And I kind of made myself not only like the ad hoc trainer for financial exploitation issues, but offered my services for training new staff, which in turn led me to learn where these training rooms were, and then said, you know, if we have an E-MDT meeting, we could do it here because this space is perfect. Do you think that's okay? And they'd be like, yeah, sure. So now they have to house the E-MDT meetings, which means they have to attend because someone's got to let me in. So it's not just for a good head of hair. I've got something going on in there. And then obviously we encourage members to invite new employees, but again, it goes through us. And, you know, I have meetings where multiple APS people attend, and that's fine. Because odds are smaller counties, even in bigger counties, these people are going out in groups of 2 because some of these situations are kind of dangerous. You know, we've got family members that are aggressive, or maybe the victim is a little questionable. The home is very unsafe in their opinion. So we make sure that we kind of have, they're all invited. It's like an open door. They've all signed confidentiality. They know the rules already. So there will be some of my counties, I have multiple APS people at each meeting. Is this me? No.
Well, this one's me. So I'm going to acknowledge I'm seeing it's 2:47. So we have 13 minutes left, and we clearly are somewhat chatty. Oh, funny, Lisa, I just saw your message about a time check. So I just wanted to give you all a heads up that we are paying attention to that, and we'll try to keep moving. So another one of the objectives was in regards to onboarding. And I think there's formal onboarding and informal onboarding. And thank you to PowerPoint for having these pictures of these little guys in there with thumbs up. But I think, again, the way in which you onboard may depend on the status of your team development, how you are as a coordinator, again, kind of like I referenced before in terms of my age as a coordinator, and then also the team personality. Each team has a very different personality. For the 3 teams that I'm still coordinating, I coordinate each 3 of those teams very differently. I'm a different coordinator with each team I show up with. And so again, it's that ability to be adaptable. So in terms of like some formal onboarding processes, it may include a meeting observation. Typically, we're seeing if there is some, we want them to see kind of what this looks like. For a brand new agency that we may be looking to include, that also may include, and sorry, I'm going out of order, but a presentation to the team of the agency. Some teams go very formal and kind of vote on a, do you want this person included or not type of thing. So that's kind of a team procedure that will be identified based off of each team. And then there's, the formal orientation. You can kind of see there's some things in terms of E-MDT overview, the team overview, how to make a case referral, what cases are eligible, and sharing any information, flyers, media, referral forms, things like that in a more formal manner. And then also discussing some of those roles and expectations of what I'm looking for out of you being a part of this team, you as a representative, but also you as that agency. And I think both Becky and I are probably more of the informal process. So I think, Becky, we're going to do this slide.
Yeah, so the informal, oh, okay. So, informal, just brief introduction with a flyer and confidentiality agreement. Having them do the meeting observation, we do the follow-up work with them just to make sure that they understand everything that we've kind of gone over, make sure there was any issues or any questions or anything like that, or if they wanted to kind of look at additional information. I usually don't have that situation occur. People are really excited about watching the team interact, do their conversations, and then being a part of it. So they're usually pretty excited because it's not what they expected. We do encourage the open communication. I'm a big fan of that. I'm like, you can send me a text on my work cell. You can, most of them don't, and they send it to my personal. You can, send me an email. We can do a Zoom. We can do, I'll come to you if you want me to come hang out and we'll sit and talk. We can get a couple people together, whatever. Just to kind of make it open and free so that they understand that they don't have to just talk to me. They can talk to other people on the team and kind of have their little work, and then they can, get back with me so that at least I'm on the same page, so that when we attend a meeting, I'm not like, oh, that happened. Okay. Because that makes me not look good. And then offer opportunities for anonymous feedback. I do that. I tell them that they can submit things to me. I do send out the Navarro survey once a year, most of them, but it's kind of hard to do that because then they email it back to me and I'm like, okay. but I do give them the opportunity to tell me, and I only want this to be a positive experience. So if something is not working, just let me know. I'm not going to take it personal. I might, but I wouldn't tell them. And I'm going to work to correct that. And I mean, that's pretty much it. So, and onboarding is an ongoing process. This is me or you, I don't know.
I don't know, but we'll share it. It's not one and done. And so one of the things that a lot of people kind of dread onboarding because it seems like such a big thing, right? It seems like there's just going to have to be so much work that's being done. But really you're kind of onboarding throughout the entire time that you're coordinating, whether it's a new team member or an ongoing team member. And so don't think of it as a one and done process. Just keep in mind that everything that you're doing is really a piece of the onboarding process.
Yeah.
And so this is there are a lot of words on these slides, right? So that's why we had a little GIF earlier. Now we've got pictures. So you're as a coordinator, you've got your team figured out, and you finally figured out how you work together as a team, how you're kind of collaborating together, who is doing what, how you communicate, who likes which candy. That is a question that I keep track of because I want to know if I bring, Reese's peanut butter cups, is somebody going to go into anaphylaxis? It also, believe it or not, brings people back to that table.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, like you're functioning together as a team. And then all of a sudden you'll see here right under Becky, we've got Kelly, who's sitting there very angelic and very sweet looking. But then all of a sudden she's recasted. And so you all of a sudden have this new person. It's like when there's just a big change in your favorite TV show. And now you need to learn, how do you interact with this person? What are the different ways that you need to communicate? How do you need to figure out what information do they need to know in order to engage with the team, in order to engage with you as a coordinator? And so, it's kind of it's a silly representation. Originally, we were going to try to do a Brady Bunch thing, but like this is just, it can be so difficult when you have that team member turnover. And it's just one of those things to keep in mind because it can be difficult and it can throw a wrench and it will feel different.
Yeah.
And so when you're managing that membership, it can feel like you have a constant turnover of people who are sitting in that one seat. Sometimes it's, with law enforcement, sometimes it's with APS, sometimes it doesn't really depend. It depends. Oh my gosh, I'm saying depends like 15 times, depending on the agency, depending on who is sitting at that table with you. I think one of the things that's so important is developing that rapport so that you can feel more comfortable engaging, asking those questions. Because I think managing the memberships is kind of like being able to, you want people to want to come to the meeting and you want people to want to spend time there. And so sometimes it wasn't, when we were first starting, it wasn't because of the cases that we were discussing for some of my team members, it was because of the other people sitting at that table. And so we were able to develop that team cohesion, that team bond. Don't get me wrong, it took a very long time, but we were able to get people to keep coming back because of that. And I still have some of my original members, but I have some that have turned over and over. I have, a law enforcement person who I joke and say he retired and ruined my life because now I can't get somebody to replace them because they're so swamped. And that is a gap for my team. Another thing is, those on-call members. And again, we talked about a little bit earlier that creativity and flexibility. And when you're thinking about memberships, and this is something that I've done for a few of my teams, and one that sticks out for me is, I don't really think of him as a liaison member. He's still a core member, but he's kind of an on-call core member. And it's my DA from one of my smaller counties. He is not able to commit to participating in the meetings on a regular basis. He can't commit an ADA because of their staffing. But what he does commit to is open and regular communication with my investigator and open and regular communication with me. And so even though he can't sit there at that table, there's a gap in the fact that I can't get that question answered while we're sitting there. But what I can do is I can call him after and I know he'll pick up the phone. And that's because of the relationship that we've been able to build together. And the fact that he does still find meaning in the team, but time-wise, he can't commit himself or his staff to participate. And so that's just another example of kind of that creativity in terms of how you can continue to fill some of the needs of the team, even if that person can't be sitting there at that table. And then we talked about a little bit the celebrating successes, big and small. Think about your cases, think about, making sure you're framing things with your teams in the sense of what does your team define as a success? What I found is so many of my teams started off by they wanted prosecution, they wanted law enforcement involvement. And we still, to this day, we are continuously working on reframing that and keeping in mind that our victim is first. And so whether maybe it's not what they want, maybe it's not what the victim wants, maybe it is what the victim wants, but it's not actually realistic. And so it's trying to figure out how can we protect that individual, how can we stop the abuse that's going on, and how can we ensure that they are safe moving forward. And that is a huge success that sometimes we overlook as a team. And so it's important as my role as a coordinator to bring that up and celebrate that with my team, and then also calling out the people who made that happen so that they see the work that is being done. Because I think all of us work in a field that is very largely under recognized in terms of the successes that we do and the way that we contribute to cases. And so that's something that I really like to highlight with my teams, even as far as bringing sparkling grape juice to meetings to be able to celebrate things.
Oh, it's supposed to be sparkling grape juice?
I know, fun fact, I can't reimburse you for that, sorry. Just kidding, guys. So we have 2 minutes left. This is a quote that I want to just be able to share with you, and then I promise this is the end of our slides, but this was a quote that was shared with me early on by Risa Breckman, who was the former director of the New York City Elder Abuse Center, for those of you who may know her. And it's really been meaningful for me as I've been thinking about creating teams. I, as a social worker, I took my group work class and I was like, I am ever going to run a group ever in my life. And now here I am. But, coming together is a beginning, staying together is progress, and working together is success. And that's by Henry Ford. And so, it's just, you will be in different stages, you will be in a different process, but you are doing amazing work, even if you're just at the point where you're starting to call people, or if you're at the point where you're reviewing cases. But even just that coming together, that is the first step. Making those phone calls, that is the first step to create the success and to be able to move forward. So I wanted to share that quote with all of you. And I know that we're at 1 minute left, so I'm really sorry. Anna promised in the beginning there'd be time for questions. I've been monitoring the chat. I haven't seen anything come in, but feel free to jump in if you would like to.
I think also in the next slide, there's some contact information too, if questions do come up after the fact. So feel free to reach out.
Just a quick reminder, I threw it in the chat. The 2021 folks will have a chance to ask questions and talk more about membership at the PLG tomorrow at 1:30 Eastern. And the 2021 folks are talking about where you stand with your no cost extension, and any questions about continuing or finishing out your grant, and that'll be tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. So same bat time, same bat channel, and James will find out for you what we need to about that. But yeah, thanks so much for the two of y'all, and just a quick reminder that the PLGs are a great place to find that camaraderie with your colleagues. Joni, did you have a quick question?
I just wanted to say, Rebecca and Allison, you guys are great presenters, so entertaining, so engaging. The material was so common sense, interesting the whole time. And Rebecca, I'm definitely going to steal your line. She's exhausting. But great job, you guys. Really, I got so much out of this because I just shared an email with Lisa this morning, how important the program coordinator role is. And I've learned that the hard way, because the human capital that you guys need to put out there to keep everything running. I've had a lot of turnover and staffing issues this year, and everything that you said, I needed to hear today. So thank you for such an awesome presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. And if you have more feedback, wonderful feedback, I just dropped the evaluation link in the chat. So spend some time filling that out. I promise it takes like 2 minutes, if that. And thank you all for coming out today. And thank you both to our wonderful presenters as well.
Well, thank you for having us. This was great. And hopefully you'll start to become your cheerleaders for your teams too. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.